Ian McFarland.
Labas.
And a high five. Oh, yeah. Good luck.
Labas, Kepsekasi. Manuvada is Ian McFarland. Malone SV2B'14. And that was about all of my Lithuanian. So I'm going to talk about working with uncertainty, and I'm going to start with a little bit of advice. And it's contradictory advice, so I feel like I should warn you. Should we on both screens, or we leave the other one up? Are we on both screens, or do we leave the other one up? It's fine if not. OK. So I'm going to give you some contradictory advice. And the reason, but the thing to know about the contradictory advice is that the contradictory advice is correct. The advice is, one, listen to customers. Really, really important thing, right? If you're building something, it's really important to understand what your customers want. But the other piece of advice is don't listen to customers. So contradictory. I'm going to start with a kind of a famous quote from Henry Ford, who invented the automobile. Well, actually invented the production line and made the invention of the automobile something that we all have. And his great quote is, "If I had asked my customers what they want, they would have said, faster horses." So this is trotted out all the time as a reason that you should not listen to customers. So again, the advice, don't listen to customers. But then the other advice is, do listen. Listen to customers. But don't do what they say. Listen to what they say tells you about what they want to do. So we're going to go back to this quote. If I'd asked my customers what they want, they'd have said faster horses. You, as an entrepreneur, have to ask yourself the question, why do they want faster horses? They're telling you something about a need, right? Like they're expressing a real need to you. What would faster horses let them do? So do listen to customers. Just don't do what they say. Build your own hypothesis. Then test your hypothesis. Don't ask them. Look at their behavior. This is really, really important. Behavior is the thing to look at. Behavior doesn't lie. If they're doing something, that means that they want to do it. If they tell you, oh, I'd be really interested in your startup, but they don't use your startup, they are lying. They don't know they're lying, but they're not telling you the truth. But if they're actually using something or doing something, that's the thing to look at. That doesn't lie. And then what you want to do is you want to check to see if what you give them does what they want. Like, does this actually solve their problem? So there's a few steps. You want to listen, interpret, synthesize, take this thing and make it into an idea, hypothesize, and then the most important part is to check. Check to see if you are right. And you do this in a little cycle over and over again as you're working through a problem and uncertainty, right? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty. You may have an idea that somebody wants to do something. You have some idea for a startup, and you're pretty sure that this is going to be the most amazing thing ever, and then it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? It doesn't work because you didn't know everything at the time. So if you go through this cycle, start to listen to your customers and understand what they're thinking, you can get to a point where you do have something that they really want. So you need to check to see if what you give them does what they want. And if it doesn't, repeat until it does. And this is how you build a great startup. You test early, test often, and find disruptive change. And remember that disruptive change really requires insight. If it were so obvious, it would have been done by now. Really critical is that building a business requires solving problems that people want solved. You're not going to create a great startup if it's a problem that nobody has. So that's a little piece to hold in your mind as you're going through building a startup. Think through this process. So now it's time for a story. And the story is about a little startup called Friendster. This is what the website looked like when I joined back in 2004. This whole idea of a social network, we had to explain what a network was. And that's Jonathan Abrams in the middle and how he's connected to people. Right? Like, this is all stuff that we all understand really well. And we had a lot of success early. as Andreas mentioned, we went really, really, really well, and then we kind of topped out, and then Facebook came along, and the movie The Social Network was not about me, unfortunately. It was about a bunch of other guys in hoodies and stuff. So, but what we were doing was we were building a social network, the first social network, and we had a lot of success, and that success drove a lot of demand, and we had to grow the physical plant, the infrastructure that we built the application on. We literally doubled the size of our production infrastructure every month for the first 6 months I was there. And then we got to a point where we couldn't even get data center space fast enough. And one of the reasons that we ended up losing market share was because we weren't able to scale fast enough. You all live in a time when you don't have to buy your own hardware. This is when you still bought your own hardware. We had to buy and rack thousands and thousands of machines. Now you just go buy that from Amazon. So it's a very different time. But really, the main reason that we failed, and it was because we were not able to scale fast enough, and we were doing something. We'd sort of made a contract with our customers that said, we're only going to show you people that are 4 degrees out from you but are connected to you. And this is really, really important when we were first launching the product, because the whole idea of a social network was that the network of people that you're connected to is important in terms of helping you find people with whom you would have affinity, people you would like. And so we said, we're only going to show people 4 degrees out. Turns out that's really computationally hard. It turns out that at login time, we had to compute a graph that had 150,000 nodes in it average. Like, how are you connected? It's an order, if you know computer science, it's an order of n to the 4th problem. And we were doing it in about actually 600,000 nodes was the average graph size. We were doing it in about 150 milliseconds, but we were doing it for millions and millions of people. So the lesson to take away from that is don't do something really hard that nobody cares about. Turns out nobody really needed that. Turns out that MySpace, our biggest competitor at the time, if you don't remember Friendster, you won't remember MySpace. But if you remember Friendster, you probably remember MySpace. They didn't do that. They just showed you everything. And Facebook came along, and they didn't do that either. And so they were able to scale much more quickly. Now, so we had the scaling problem of trying to grow too fast. But really, remember, the most likely scaling problem you're going to have with your business is that nobody comes to your app. The failure to scale because nobody bothered to come there. So this is where I go back to the first thing that I was talking about. It's really, really important to, we found real signal in the market. We were doing something that people really cared about. And every time we doubled the capacity of the Friendster application, we absorbed that additional capacity through additional demand. The longest it took was 2 days. If you have that problem, it's an incredibly good problem to have. It's still a problem. If you have that problem, come talk to me. We'll figure it out. That's a great problem to have. So if you thought that was a story from a long time ago, I have a story from a longer time ago, from when I was at Wired magazine back in 1994. And there was this thing called the World Wide Web that we were just learning about. I had actually been doing hypertext systems stuff since 1989, before Tim Berners-Lee and the World Wide Web, but it wasn't successful yet. At Wired magazine, we built Hotwired, which was the first real commercial internet site. And there was a special kind of uncertainty we had at the time. At the time, NSFNet, the National Science Foundation, a piece of internet infrastructure that carried about 30% of the web traffic, or the internet traffic in the world, had a policy that said no commercial traffic. And so when we launched Hotwired and we created the first banner ad, we weren't even sure if NSFNet was going to carry our traffic. And it's a funny, and I think honestly the reason that they did, they were very adamant. This is not a commercial thing. At the time, the internet was not a commercial place. It was a US Defense Department project. DARPA had created the internet, and it was for the public good. But sort of by an accident of history, we did this magazine cover, the second issue that we did, at Wired. And people thought this was our policy, that we were advocating for cyber rights and for openness. And so we had a lot of credibility. And I think, honestly, the reason that NSFNet carried the traffic was because of this cover, which is funny, because we didn't have that policy. We were a business magazine. Wired to this day is really a business magazine. But that little accident of history is actually, I think, why we're all here. Because if we hadn't created a commercial internet, people wouldn't have made billions and billions of dollars on that commercial internet. And it so happens that that little piece of uncertainty, if NSFNet hadn't carried our traffic, that would have been a business-ending thing for Hotwired, and obviously for the rest of this thing that we call the commercial internet. I have a third story about a friend of mine, Evan Rabel Henshaw-Plath, who came and worked for me as the first CTO at Neo, the company that I started 3 years ago. It's a consultancy that does lean and agile development. He had a little company called Odeo. Does anybody remember Odeo? Odeo was a social podcasting site. Excuse me. And they had this great product that was about sharing podcasts. And then it was going really well, and then another competitor entered the market. Does anybody know this company? People are familiar with this company? Yeah. Good. Yeah. It's a really cool company. You should check it out. They make some laptops and stuff, too. They came out. They had iTunes at the time, but they created a podcasting. They saw what Odeo was doing, and they created a podcast sharing platform. And their business model was kind of over, which sucks. So, but they had raised a bunch of money, and they had another I think at the time, about 6 months of burn before they would have to go get other jobs. And so they created this little internal lab. But basically, every Wednesday, they would present a whole new idea and a little prototype that they'd built. And they'd try out different things. Like every week, they would come up with a couple of different things. And then one week, they came up with this little product called, well, they did two things that week. They did Twitter and Hellodio. The first one you've probably heard of. The second one you probably haven't heard of. People know what the first one is? You might have seen it. Guess what the venture community and the press jumped on? Hellodio. This is going to be huge. There's a big article about Hellodio. But what they saw, what the folks at Odeo and later at Twitter saw, was crazy high engagement. They had this, at the time, Twitter was based on SMS, and they saw people spending $100 a month on SMS bills just because of their traffic. And so they knew they had signal. If they'd listened to the advice of their venture folks, they would have focused on Hellodio, which was a video. It's a way to send a video message to somebody. They did so well, they were able to buy 2 vowels. And if you haven't guessed by now, this is the company that turned into Twitter, which I'm pretty sure you all have heard of. Back at the time, none of this was called lean. It was just a pragmatic approach to doing something. So the idea of doing something in small iterations and really looking for signal and really talking to customers, this is an old idea. It's not like we invented lean or even agile. These were just emergent properties of software development. And we figured out ways to do these things in small cycles. And so really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you call it. It really just matters that you do it. These techniques are really optimized for flexibility. And why do we care so much about flexibility? I mean, obviously, I talked about a few different examples of things that had game-changing implications, and we needed the ability to react. So you need flexibility. But in addition, it's in the nature of things that we learn more the longer we're working on it. So the ability to change what you're doing based on the newest information is actually much more important than the ability to build something based on your original hypothesis. it's critical that you sort of maximize the return on learning. And so in order to do that, our code needs to be flexible. So techniques like the agile development, things like test-driven development and behavior-driven development keep your code really flexible so that you can be optimized for learning. Lean startup is also optimized for managing the cost of learning. The idea is you want to learn as quickly as possible so that you can not spend so much. You have a finite amount of money to spend, a finite amount of time to spend before you get signal, before you actually get to where you have a successful product. So the more quickly you learn what to build, the more cheaply you can build a thing. And the better it will be. All of these things together, like this rapid cycle time, in order to do it, you need to, like, culturally, your company needs to be able to adapt to change. You need to listen to the market, not be afraid of the market, what the market tells you, and you need to embrace what your customers are telling you. So tools like Lean Startup really help with that. Agile is adaptive to change. And Lean admits that we don't actually know what to build. And it also gives you tools to help you find out. As you start a new company, you may have a great hypothesis, you may be really onto something, but the fact is, as you go through working with customers, you're going to find out a lot more things about what you should have been building in the first place. There's never been a startup. Over my career, so I was at Wired. We invented a lot of things like the banner ad, right? Oh, by the way, the story about the banner ad. Do the numbers 468 by 60 mean anything to you? Yeah. So for all time, banner ads, the IAB Unit 1 banner ad is 468 pixels by 60. Why is that? Does anybody know why that is? I'll tell you why that is. So in 1994, when we were doing Hotwired, the average screen size was 800 by 600. We were using Netscape 0.94 beta. And so on an 8 by 6 screen with the Chrome, that left you 468 pixels of width with the fully expanded web page. And then 60 looked really good with our current design at the time. So I also sort of bring that up because I want to remind people that there are a lot of assumptions that we make that things are thought through or that we as entrepreneurs have answers, right? And the fact is, none of us really have answers. I was one of the 4 people who sat around trying to decide how big banner ads were going to be. We didn't think we were deciding it for all time, right? But we thought that, you know, we just needed a thing to sell stuff. So by the same time, like, as much as things change, there are certain things that just don't change because they didn't really need to change. So it's just to close on this thought again, it's so important that as an entrepreneur that you embrace the signal that the market is giving you. Where I see entrepreneurs fail all the time is by being so sure that their idea was right that they ignore what the market is telling them. And I'll give one last story around Friendster. I remember, it's funny because this just happened with Netscape in the last month. Friendster, back in 2005, we did this thing where we told people we didn't want fakesters. We didn't want people that didn't have their real identity on the site. And it turns out about 50% of what people did on the site was go and look at these great fake profiles that people had made. And Jonathan was adamant, that's not how you're going to use Friendster. And one of the things, we lost a lot of people in that. One of the big failures that we had at Friendster is we lost a lot of customers. They all went to Tribe at the time, if people remember back in the day, because we were trying to constrain what people did. So the real takeaway there is really, really listen. As an entrepreneur, you will be more successful if you listen to the negative feedback and interpret the negative feedback and try to understand its meaning, because that's telling you what your customer is going to do in the future. And if you embrace that signal, you'll find the right thing to do and build a better product and build a better fit with your customer and create a successful business. With that, I'm doing a workshop at 4 where we'll get a little bit more into this stuff on the workshop track. And with that, at you.
thanks a lot, not only for the presentation, also for the Lithuanian skills.
Thank you. Thank you.
Give it up once more, guys. Awesome job.